All right, continuing You Shall Not Pass week, meaning the point where I got to get some stuff off my chest because I'm tired of just feeling shouted down. I'm tired of feeling like, oh, there's just too many people who disagree with me, so I'm going to shut up. No, that's not Red Hulk. That's not me. I am comfortable having an unpopular opinion. So yesterday was my first week of You Shall Not Pass. Today continues it. And my question for today is, those of you, you gender culture warriors, the people on the extremes of that argument who believe there are only two genders, period, end of story, and the people who believe there are 42 different genders, whatever, why the hell do you care so much? Really, how does this really impact your life? I understand it being a point of interest, like kind of like the mental equivalent of a Rubik's Cube. I get that. But these two extremes are so emotionally and philosophically invested in the idea that there are two genders or there are an unlimited number of genders because if you don't like your gender, make a new one up. Both ignore evidence and practicality in service to their viewpoints. And that's why I wonder, why do you care so much? When people do that, when people ignore evidence, it's because they feel like their identity is being attacked. Why do you feel like what somebody else thinks about gender has anything to do with you? It's like being really upset about the house the Sorting Hat sorted you into in Harry Potter, for fuck's sakes. I mean, we have same-sex marriage now. So gender doesn't determine who you can marry. We fortunately have a voting franchise for everybody. We have universal suffrage, which means your gender doesn't determine whether or not you can vote or own property or keep your money. So why does it matter so damn much? Men can run companies. Women can run companies. Men can raise children. Women can raise children. Why does it matter what you are? Why does it matter if you feel like neither? Because, see, there is something where your physiology and anatomy, not your gender, but your anatomy and physiology actually matters. The hospital. When you're dealing with doctors. Say an intersex patient walks into the hospital or is wheeled into the hospital. Doctors need to get the information they need in as few words as possible. And so if you tell someone that you're female, or actually more to the point, you're male, because that's the one intersex people tend to be more hidden. They think you're male, and a doctor opens you up and finds a uterus. Oh shit. Because you're intersex, and there was no right answer. So for the purposes of intersex people, we need to move beyond two genders for medical purposes. Because if someone is unconscious and wheeled into the hospital, they can't say, oh, by the way, I'm not man or female. I'm externally I have a penis, but I also have ovaries. You can't say that if you're unconscious. There needs to be an easy designation in your records that tell people that you're intersex. That's very important. And that's the part where the two genders argument just stops being harmless, because those people are real. Just because somebody's a minority doesn't mean they exist. But on the other flip side, the people who are like, Z and Zir or D and Deer or whatever, that has no meaning to anyone but you. So it is not useful. It describes nothing. Instead of there being a continuum of gender, the equivalent, for instance, of instead of it just being that's red, that's crimson, scarlet, or cherry. They are all shades of red, but people do not see them as the same. That is a matter of perspective. But crimson, scarlet, and cherry still convey meaning. People know what they mean. If you're making up your own gender pronoun, it is a useless word that just drives people crazy. I'm sorry to hurt your feelings. This is just the practicality of it. Your gender is not your name. Your gender is a description that is the same as the color of your eyes or hair. And yes, the color of your eyes may change because you put in colored contacts, and the color of your hair may change because you dye it, but you still need to be able to describe it to someone in certain circumstances. And if you're just making up a word, the color of my hair is cat, what the hell does that mean? Nothing. So there has to be a happy medium. And if you want to think about yourself as not male or not female, there should be a place for you. But the whole social importance of gender is that people use it to divvy people up. That's why I brought up the sorting hat. It's kind of weird in Harry Potter that your entire academic career is determined what sort of people you get to live with for the next, 5 years there? 6? But it's determined by a magical hat who spends 30 seconds with you. That's kind of scary to me because people change. As that nobody can jump houses. Like, you are sorted. That's messed up. And unfortunately, when people care this much about gender, that's what happens to people. With the great strides in women's rights that we have had over the last 100 years, gender should mean less, not more. Which is why I go back to, why do you care, gender warriors? Why do you care so much about these labels? Why can't it be what your physical anatomy does not mean in terms of your thoughts and opinions? And I say this as somebody who is gender atypical. I spent a lot of time struggling with, I'm not good at being a girl. And as I got older and recognized, I'm just fine with being a woman, because being a woman, it's sort of meaningless. It just means, hey, I'd rather not have a period every month, but that's not pleasant. But that doesn't say anything about my opinions. And people say, some women don't menstruate. Yes, I realize that. That is a part of a subsection of womanhood. Why do you care so much? Now, I totally get why intersex people care a great deal, because they are being completely left out in this battle of extremes. They need a designation. For the example I gave earlier, they actually need representation. They need to be able to check a box and that represents all of them. Because if I had female internal sex organs and male external sex organs, I don't think I'd identify as male or female, because you're both and you're neither at the same time. It isn't a clear demarcation. And that is not the same as going, I don't feel like I conform to either gender, so I'm going to make up a word because fight the power. You're not fighting the power by doing that. You're actually making the power stronger, because you're making those socially agreed upon words mean a lot more than they do. Gender is not destiny. And the energy you spend fighting those social conventions doesn't weaken those social conventions. They are strengthening the influence those social conventions have on your behavior. So I totally get not feeling like you fit in terms of gender. I totally get finding this exceptionally interesting, because I do. I really find the whole sex gender differential fascinating, because, for most people, sex is easy. What are your parts? What that means socially is a far more complicated question. And in my opinion, we shouldn't be sorted into infinite groups, and we shouldn't be sorted into 2 groups on this point. We should be sorted into 1 group, person, because every person is an individual, stepping away from the medical sphere, stepping away from purposes of identification, which is what gender on government issue IDs deals with in countries like us where we have a health card. So we're in the system, our gender is in the system. And part of that is, so if we're unconscious, the doctor knows. And it's very important if you're a trans woman or a trans man, it's very important the government knows that, right? Because you're just, that's important. It's like you're on medications, powerful medications, your internal anatomy may not match, your external anatomy may not match the M or the F. We need a different designation for practical purposes there. And it makes more sense to fight about the practicalities of how we include people like that in our system effectively than to be stuck on this. There are only two anatomical genders, which aren't true. I mean, we're a sexually dimorphic species, that's true, but it doesn't mean there aren't variations among that. So, trans women don't have the same anatomy as a cis woman. So, whoop, there's two demarcations within that gender. And trans men don't have the same anatomy as a cis man. Whoops. Not so simple now in terms of anatomical gender. And intersex people are different still. There's far less uniformity among intersex people. So we, for the practical purposes of medical science, now have 5 genders. Because the physiology of a trans man is not the same as a woman because they're taking hormones. That matters from a medical perspective. So this seems really practical when you take the ideological BS out of it, and this is the only reasons we should care. This is the only reason we should care how many genders there are. And it's funny because just by process of elimination and following the facts, I've actually landed on the indigenous two-spirit model, where there's men, women, men who dress like women, that's like a literal translation, women who dress like men, and then intersex, people who don't really fit neatly anywhere else. And the indigenous peoples did that because your job within the community was based on your gender. There was men's work and there was women's work, and certain rituals involved men and women. And it's like, where do you stand during the things where you need to know where you stand? That is what sort of gender does in those cultures. In our cultures, where we don't really have those issues because we don't practice, ritualistic male-female magic or things that, not magic, ritual, I shouldn't say. First Nations people are offended by that, but I apologize. But, we don't have these demarcations. It's not saying the demarcations are bad, but we have even less need to fight about this. This should be an issue for medical science and just basically government systems, how to incorporate these people who just want to be themselves. Now, that's why I don't have any sympathy for people who make up their own pronouns and want to fight the system, because you are not helping the acceptance of the larger minority of intersex and trans people who was born in the wrong body. I just want to be able to live as a woman because it feels more normal to me. Can I please have that? You're muddying the waters for their acceptance in the world by arguing that people should say your gender is Fred. That's your name. And at the end of the day, that's what most people I know who are intersex or trans say. If in doubt, call me by my name. That's so simple, isn't it? Because you know what? That means you don't make the mistake. That's what I ended up doing based on the advice of a two-spirit person. I know it's just, say their name is Sam. You don't have to worry about he or she or it or, it's just Sam did this and Sam did that. And I just use their name so I don't make the mistake. Really easy. And I understand what it's like to not fit. I understand having to try some things on until you find one that works. And I think that people should be able to do that. But when you get fixated, fight to the death fixated on what you call something, you're not looking deeper than the surface of an issue. And that when you only have a surface understanding of an issue, you're actually holding back progress instead of helping progress evolve. We have to have reasonable limitations on things. And for something like a passport, something like a driver's license, you are not going to have the option of 42 different recognized pronouns. You're just not. So, 5 you can fit on a form. But any more than that, it becomes meaningless. The reason we have those designations is, say there's an Andy Simons. Andy could be a boy or a girl's name, and so the government uses, it's just like playing Carmen Sandiego, you use identifiable characteristics like gender, like hair color, like eye color, so that people can tell the female redheaded Andy Simmons from the dark-skinned, dark-haired male Andy Simmons. That's what these designations do. They have to have agreed-upon meanings. And we can't widen our horizons if the alternative to there are only 2 genders, period, end of story, which, let's face it, is religiously driven. Because, like I said, yeah, sexual dimorphism is a thing as the rule, but there are exceptions to that rule that are proven. And more people who got normalization surgery, as they used to call it, don't feel like the gender someone else picked for them. And we shouldn't be doing that to people. I relate to that, and this may sound shocking to people, but this is why I am so big on, this is my identity, why I lose my shit. And that's why I say there's an emotional thing here. I lose my shit over people that treat breasts as dirty in video games. Because I have had more than one doctor advocate to me that I should get a breast reduction. I cannot describe how much I wanted to hit that doctor and it was just an emotional fight or flight response, right? Because, you're offering to cut into my body. You think, surgery, which always has the risk of complications, especially with me, who responds badly to general anesthetic and needs a shit ton of it because ginger kid. You think that this is a better alternative than body acceptance and a decent quality bra because you bring me more into the range of normal that society decides is acceptable. If a woman wants a breast reduction for herself because her back is killing her, that is her choice. But no doctor should be trying to convince me that I should be cutting open my body because someone else thinks it's worthwhile. And so I completely understand why people who are born intersex want the right to choose for themselves, not have someone make gender assignment surgery decisions for them. And they should have that right. That's a really important thing in a person's life, especially in an age where people have such strong opinions about gender. And I really think we'd all be better off if we turned our emotional background noise down from a screaming roar to something like sort of a dull murmur, so we can actually hear the other side. Because I bet a lot of people have already left these angry comments. Here's my second question for you people who care very, very much. Why do you think you should be allowed to care very, very much about your position, but not respect that other people feel equally strongly from another point of view? If you think someone is just wrong in that regard, you don't have an open mind. You're not willing to listen to other people's experiences. You aren't willing to weigh the evidence that on both sides is actually against your point of view. That's not a rational point of view. That's not a fact-based approach to a problem. And I'm tired of the extremists having the floor on this debate because nothing budges. Nothing budges. We are not going to get a bazillion pronouns legally recognized by the government. It's just too inconvenient. But we're also not at the point where only two genders is a viable option for interactions with the government and the medical industry. We're beyond that. That's good. Life evolves. We're trying to make changes so that more people can feel like they fit, and that's a noble goal. So how about we work together and find a practical solution instead of screaming to make ourselves feel good?